I said Granddad, Halloween, and flaming cow poop, would you want to know the rest of the story? Well, my children sure did, and just like that, I had them hooked on family history. So if you are tired of struggling trying to get your non-genealogy family members interested in the family history and what you are doing and the stories of your ancestors, stick around, because in this video, I'm showing you how to make oral history fun and find family history clues in the process. Hey there, I'm Lisa Lisson with Are You My Cousin, and this channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not get overwhelmed in the process. So if it sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. Growing up in the rural 1940s in South Central Virginia, well, Halloween was more about the tricks than the treats, at least for a group of the Talbot boy cousins. So on Halloween, the boys would go out to the cow pasture, get one of those dried cow patties that was out there. That's cow poop, just so we're clear on this, guys. And they would put it in a paper bag. They would then set that paper bag on an unsuspecting person's porch, light it on fire, ring the doorbell, and oh yeah, run. Well, you can imagine. Person opens the door, sees a small fire on their front porch, and stomps the fire out. Well, just use your imagination on how the rest of that played out. But that story, that got my kids hooked on family history. That got my kids hooked on wanting to know more stories about what their grandfather did when he was little. Now, just for a disclaimer, my father has assured me that he was the youngest of the boys in that cousin group and that he was really just along for the ride. At least that's his story, and he is sticking to it. Now, for this Halloween season, let me know in the comments if you have a fun Halloween story that crops up in your family history. You know oral history is important to your family research. And I would go so far as to say that oral history is a crucial piece of your genealogy and family history research. Unfortunately, I think it's one of the most overlooked pieces of our research that we tend to put off. We tend to think, I'll get that later, or it's, I don't know who to talk to. I'll figure out who to get those stories from later. I'll figure out where to find those stories later. So it is often overlooked. I think it's part of our research. But the problem with putting off gathering and recording our family history is the fact that we risk missing vital clues to our family history. We miss vital clues to family relationships. We miss clues to perhaps where the family lived, where the old home place may have actually been. We miss clues to perhaps an old family cemetery that could have been around in the area where our ancestors lived. Oral history gives us clues and information about our ancestors, about some of the motivations that inspired them to do what they did, to buy a piece of property or move to a new area. And it also gives us clues to the family's culture. So for example, I lost my great-grandfather in the 1920 census. Now, he was very much alive. His wife and their 3 children that they had at the time were enumerated in that census record. Clear as a bell, everything looked great. Now, an unsuspecting researcher may assume, oh, he must have died young and leaving her a widow. That was not the case at all. I happen to know that my great-grandfather lived well into the 1960s. He was very much alive in 1920 when the census was taken. We have firsthand accounts of people who knew him. So that was established, that was from my standpoint. So I sat on that mystery for quite a while, wondering how was I going to figure out where he was. I could not find him anywhere. And then I ran into one of my older aunts, and I asked her, where was he in the 1920 census? I can't find him. What do you know? Where could he have possibly been? And she looked at me, she's like, Lisa, of course I know exactly where he was. She said he was with my father because that was the off season of the farming. So he had left the area to go to another state to work on constructing highways, roads and highways, to earn money in the off season of farming. And then he came back home. So he was actually not home when the census was taken. In fact, he never actually even appears anywhere in the 1920 census because he was on the move so much. But if I didn't have that piece of oral history, if I didn't seek out that family story, I would never have solved that question in my mind and never would have figured out where he was in 1920. So beyond the factual clues that we can find in a record, oral history gives us that little bit of insight, that motivation, and in this case, motivation to earn more money to support the family. And it gave me that insight and puts him in a place and time that I would never have thought to look. Okay, so let's get back to the sweeter side of Halloween. Now, the sweeter side of Halloween actually involves my mother's side of the family, and they were a family of girls. Halloween was a bit different, and it was all about the treats. They lived on a small street. They trick-or-treated with just a few houses, but the moms would all get together and make homemade treats like candied apples and cookies. And oh, I'm sure it was delicious because I know these women, and they were fabulous cooks. It was all about the treats. How does that help my genealogy research? And how does that help me connect my family to the past generations? That resonated with my daughter. My daughter wanted to create those Halloween treats she heard about in her own kitchen. She's particularly interested in culinary heritage. In fact, she even started a blog about it called The Food Memory Project. So by tapping into the stories of foods and the Halloween treats, my daughter can tap into a deeper connection with her grandmother and her great-grandmother as well. I do recognize that in the search for our ancestors, in the search of growing that family tree, it is easy to overlook the stories behind our generations. It is easy to overlook collecting the oral history. But as you work to grow your family tree, consider why you started this whole process in the first place. I bet it was to learn more about your family, about who they were, what motivated them to maybe come to America, or to move west, or to pursue a career on stage. Maybe you even asked yourself at the start of this whole process if you're like your ancestors, and which one are you most like? So seek out your family's oral history. Seek out family members close, seek out distant family members, seek out other collateral lines. They have different stories. They could be similar stories, they may be completely different stories, but seek the stories out because you never know. You might just find a flaming cow poop story in your family history as well. Learn more about finding and collecting your own family stories in the video that I've picked out for you on the screen now.